So this is the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Thank you so much for tuning into this video in which we hope to understand the null factor law. So this is very important when we come to try to solve quadratics and other polynomial equations. So the null factor law says if you have two things, A and B, that multiply to give 0, either the first thing is equal to 0 or the second thing is equal to 0. So how does this help us when we're trying to solve quadratics? Well, what we will do is we'll start with a quadratic equation, then factorize it, and then use the null factor law. So we'll factorize it to try and get something that looks like this, for example. So if we're able to factor a quadratic expression, we write it as something times something equals 0. The null factor law says either the first thing is equal to 0, or the second thing is equal to 0. So if x minus 4 is equal to 0, we can just add 4 to both sides and get x equals 4. How easy is that? Let's look at another example. Let's look at this example. 2x minus 5 times 4x plus 7 equals 0. So we have something times something equals 0. We can use the null factor law. The null factor law says either the first thing equals 0, or the second thing equals 0. Now, both of these are very simple linear equations to solve. So for this one, we would just add 5 to both sides and then divide each side by 2. X equals 5 over 2. For the other one, we would subtract 7 from both sides and then divide each side by 4. So we get x equals minus 7 over 4. So note, this is an example of an equation that has two solutions. Quadratic equations often do have two solutions. Sometimes, however, quadratic equations only have one solution. So let's say, for example, we had 2x plus 1 all squared equals 0. This has only one solution. And we can still use the null factor law, however, because this is 2x plus 1 times 2x plus 1. So the null factor law says that 2x plus 1 must equal 0. Solve this, subtract 1 from both sides, divide each side by 2, we get x is minus a half. That's how we use the null factor law. Thanks so much for tuning in. This has been the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Have a great day.